Well, my topic is, as you said, the growth imperative inherent in our monetary system. All politicians all over the world, irrespective of their political orientation, whether they're more left side or right side, seek economic growth. Also, textbooks on macroeconomics promote economic growth as the panacea for virtually all problems in the world, all problems which can be seen as economic problems at least. And this is irrespective of whether they seek a more neoclassical or more Keynesian approach. Actually, Keynes wrote his general theory to promote growth and this way to get rid of unemployment. So if we grow and grow and grow, this has strongly negative effects on our environment. Do we have to be surprised that we destroy our natural environment, that we overexploit natural resources if we always grow? Economic growth, real economic growth, means that we produce more this year than we have produced the year before. And the year before, we have produced more than the year before that year. The laws of thermodynamics tell us that we cannot produce something out of nothing. And everything we produce needs energy. So if we produce more, we need more inputs and more energy. Of course, we can try to be more efficient and produce things with less inputs, like this thing we can produce with less plastics or less energy, but we never produce this thing without any input and without any energy. This means if we keep on growing, then we will end up destroying the environment. We will end up cutting the last tree and fishing the last fish. And even natural resources that are renewable, like forests, will be destroyed if we keep on growing, because if we keep on growing, at one moment, we will exploit the natural resource on a faster pace than it replenishes. That means economic growth in the long run will destroy our environment. But why do we have to grow? Why do we always seek economic growth? Is it just greed, or is it some form of collateral of capitalism, of market economics? Here today, I will show that it is not. Instead, the growth imperative is part of our monetary system. And this is actually the same monetary system in capitalism or communism. It is our monetary system that obliges to grow. This is not recognized yet in mainstream economic thinking. We know we have to grow. This is not questioned, but we don't really understand why this is. In bioeconomics and environmental economics and ecological economics, this is discussed, but it is discussed controversially. It is an ongoing discussion. So today I will try to point out the arguments in favor of the existence of a growth imperative inherent in our monetary system, and then discuss the counter-arguments and try to discard them. Keynes said that we have what he believed is a preference for liquidity. This is nothing else to say we have a preference for saving. We like to save. We like to save surpluses for future times. This is something natural. Even animals do this. Like here, the bears do have it in their belly for the next winter. And the hamsters, they have it in the cheek. So it's natural to try to save for future times. But the natural perishability of all things keeps our natural instinct to hoard in check. Everything decays. So we can hoard for a winter or 2 winters, but not more. But money is completely different. Money is completely different from real goods. It's easy to hoard. This is why we like to hoard it, because it's so easy compared to real goods to hoard it. So if money ends up hoarded under the mattress, this is not good for the economy. Money has to circulate. Money is the blood of our economy. And not only is hoarded money bad for the economy, it is also bad for nature, because it gives an incentive to produce more than we need. Since we can easily hoard surpluses, so we can cut some more trees than we need today, and hoard the money. So our unnatural design gives an incentive to produce more than we actually need. But it is not only that it gives an incentive, it even obliges to do so. And this, again, has to do with the unnatural storability of money. As I just mentioned, money has to circulate. The idea of money is to be a medium to facilitate the exchange of goods and services. So it must circulate in the economy. It is the blood of the economy. But our money, as it is designed today, comes along with sort of genetic flaw. It is a little bit sticky. It doesn't really circulate. It always wants to end up under the mattress. So we invented an incentive to not hoard the money under the mattress, but to bring it to the bank. This incentive is called interest. Interest is, as Keynes defined it, the reward to abstain from liquidity. It's a reward to not hoard the money under the mattress. To come back to the metaphor of money as the blood of the economy, interest would be the drug that makes our blood more liquid, more easy to circulate. And as is the case with any drug that you apply for a prolonged period, so this brings along strong side effects. And one of the side effects is that we have to grow and that we at the end will end up overexploiting our natural environment. And the second effect is that we have a constant growing income inequality. The second point I will not discuss here today. This would be for another talk. I will concentrate on the first point. But these two things, these two problems in the world, I think this is the major challenges of the world, the unsustainability and the income inequality, both are rooted in our financial system. And this is not really recognized yet in economic teaching. So how is the unsustainability related to our monetary system, especially to interest? Well, if we take a bank account, we put $10 on a bank account with 5% interest per year. So this will need like 15 years until this amount will have doubled. So in 15 years, we'll have $20. And 15 years later, we will have 40. 15 years later, 80. 15 years later, 160, and so on. So our money in our bank accounts grows exponentially. And someone would say now, yes, but the interest is so low. Well, if the interest is lower, then the flat part of the curve would be, the flat part would be longer, like the black curve here, but it still is an exponential curve. Because the money on the bank account will have doubled in some times. And always if something doubles every certain time, this is an exponential curve. So money in the bank account grows so slowly at the beginning, but then ever faster. The DK investment funds of the Sparkassen Group even uses this thing to attract clients. They say, your money, if you invest with us, doubles or behaves like chickens. Chickens lay eggs, and from the eggs come out new chickens that lay eggs. So as if money was something natural and would increase naturally. In fact, exponential growth does not exist in nature nowhere, except, or at least not for a long period, except in the case of cancer. But cancer is, as we all know, not healthy. And even in cancer, it doesn't go forever. At some moment, the person or the animal who has cancer, that is cancer, dies. To even better understand the effect of the exponential growth, we can use this concept, which is called money penny, Joseph's penny. If Jesus would have inherited just one penny from his father Joseph, and if Jesus would have put the money in a bank account at 5% annual interest rate, how much would be this today? Of course, Jesus wouldn't have put the money in a bank account because the Bible actually prohibits interest. But if he had, how much would be this today? The answer is, it would be 589 billion planets Earth of pure fine gold. This simple example shows us that not only the system is destined to fail and to produce a financial crisis every certain time, which we will see probably soon, but also that we have to grow because someone has to work all this interest, right? And we have to compulsively try to keep on with the economic growth to be able to pay the interest. Here we can see the money supply of the US economy. The money supply is cash, which is only a very small fraction of all money, and bank accounts. And since the bank accounts develop exponentially, we can clearly see that the money supply, which are all banks accounting taken together, plus cash, growth exponentially. But where do the banks get the money from to pay the money on bank accounts? The answer is they have to grant loans. There's no interest paying without debt. So if money supply grows by debt, total debt has to grow in a likewise manner. And this is here the money supply and the total debt contrasted of the US economy. And what can we see? Both grow exactly the same way. And it has to be the same way because, as I just said, there is no interest payment without debt. If money supply grows because of interest, then debt has to grow in the likewise manner. So, and you can see this actually in any economy of the world. This is not only the US economy. You can see this in Germany and any other country in the world. If you take the period of time long enough, you will see exponential growth and money supply and debt. So, as Frederick Soddy, Nobel Prize winner Frederick Soddy once said, 100 years ago, actually 100 years ago, he said, money is a credit-debt relation from which none can effectually escape. This is so true, and we still don't really understand it. Here we can now grasp the idea why we have to grow. The first thing is there's a steadily growing interest burden. The interest burden grows because there's ever more debt in the economy. So someone has to pay it. And this someone are we. We, the people, the businesses, we all have to pay it. If interest makes debt grow, so we have to also, we have to pay more, and then we have to grow if we don't want to lose status quo. Also, even if we are lucky, we're not indebted, we still have to grow because usually then the government is indebted and well, increases taxes. And even if we are lucky and the government does not increase taxes, then we will see inflation. Actually, inflation also comes from the system. There's so many theories about inflation, but in the end, they're all about the same. It's more money compared to good. No theory of inflation explains why there's constantly more money compared to good, and we have just understood it because money supply grows in the long run exponentially. And so it grows faster usually as the production does. So we have inflation, which also makes that we have to grow. And even if we are lucky, we have a business with no debt, our government does not increase taxes, and our employees do not want a readjustment for inflation, we still have to grow for the third reason, which is interest as opportunity costs. Imagine a business. Every business owner, every day, thinks, where do I put my money? Where do I invest my money? Have I invested my money in my own business? Or else, I put the other option would be sell everything and put the money in the bank. If the interest in the bank account in the long run is higher than the profit that the business owner can make in his own business, well, then he will choose to sell his business and put the money in the bank. Any business has to grow at least at the pace, at the rhythm of interest. Otherwise, his business does not make sense. So interest is the rhythm after which the economy, the real economy, has to dance, and not just a fetish as some people believe. At least if the businesses want to gain money. Maybe we can do a business because we want to help people with our products out of love for our neighbor. But most people do business because they want to gain money. And if they could gain money more in the bank account, so they will not do their business anymore. So we have now understand that we have to grow. And this also makes it possible to understand where unemployment comes from. Because a business that has to grow but does not manage to grow, well, the second best alternative would be to save costs somewhere else, right? And how can a business save cost? The most important cost position in any business is the human workforce. So this brings a strong pressure to either grow or replace humans by machines. And if the machine is old, then also the machine will have to look for a new job. So this is why we see empirically that we or either grow or we see unemployment. And this is why all politicians want to grow, because they fear unemployment. No politician wants unemployment. So we have to grow because otherwise we'll see unemployment. We know this empirically. This is called Okun's law. This is empirical observation made by Arthur Okun. We have to grow, and this is some rule, 3% to lower unemployment 0.5%. We know this empirically. No one really understands why this is. Here's the reason. The reason is that we have to grow or otherwise try to save up costs somewhere else. So if we grow, then we will destroy nature. We just mentioned that. And even the natural resources that are planted by humans as a resource have to grow in the likewise manner, because also this resource, if it doesn't bring a profit rate which we could otherwise gain on a bank account, doesn't make sense. So as Herman Daly once said, anything in nature that does not reproduce itself at the rhythm of interest rate is in danger of extinction. I love this sentence. Even nature has to grow at the path of interest, otherwise it doesn't make sense, at least if this part of nature is of economic interest for humans. So as Robert Costanza once said, the system forces a choice between increasing unsustainability or increasing unemployment and misery. In favor of this idea we find many authors in the sphere of bioeconomics and ecological economics, but there are also counter-arguments. And I studied all the counter-arguments of papers that have been published until 2 years ago. And I found always the same arguments. All the arguments we can cluster in 5 groups. There are 5 groups of counter-arguments, which I will try to explain now. One group of counter-arguments is what could be called the circular flow argument, which is published by these authors. The key argument is that if interest income is fully consumed, a stationary redistributive economy would be possible. Interest earnings are spent and thus represent an income for someone else in the economy. These authors recognize that yes, someone who takes a credit has to pay principal plus interest, so he has to grow to be able to pay the interest. But they say, at least if the money is not hoarded under the mattress and it circulates in the economy, someone else receives it. So whilst one person has to grow and work more to pay interest, other person has to work less because he receives interest. And so the argument of these papers is that in the whole of the economy, at least if the money does not end up under the mattress, there would be no growth imperative. For example, Vanslav say, the need for growth can only be justified by the incomplete consumption of interest income. Only then must the economy grow, at least at the extent of the unconsumed portion. The growth and constraint is thus not a consequence of money creation, but a consequence of income-dependent savings combined with an interest rate determined by liquidity preference. And Jackson Victor write, the fact that the charging of interest on its own does not lead to a growth imperative could perhaps have been inferred from the realization that the only interest payments which contribute directly to the GDP are the net interest payments of firms. All other interest payments turn out to be transfers between sectors and neither restrict nor enhance aggregated demand in themselves. However, this argument is wrong. Even if I receive interest, even if I'm the lucky person who has saved money in the bank and receive interest, if I have a business, my business still has to grow, at least at the pace of interest I could receive in the bank account. Because even if I receive interest somewhere else, that does not mean that my own business does not have to yield also at least this return. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Otherwise, I would better also sell all my business and put the money on the bank account and receive interest there too. And also, and this is the most important point here, interest creates new money. I call this interest money creation. Every time interest is paid somewhere, this creates new money which didn't exist before. There are new numbers in bank accounts created by interest. Where does this money come from if the central bank did not produce more money? Well, the answer is it can only come from a new loan, which is also, again, interest-bearing. This is difficult to understand in an economy with millions of people, but it's easier to understand in an economy with only 2 people. Imagine an economy consistent of 2 people, Happy Donia and Unlucky Fellow. Happy Donia owns all the money in the world, or this economy, and Unlucky Fellow has nothing. But Unlucky Fellow also wants to know how is it to have some money. And he takes a loan from Happy Donia and receives $10. After 1 year, he gives back to Happy Donia the $10, but Happy Donia now says, but where's the 5% interest? Where does the 5% interest come from if all the money is in the hands of Happy Donia? The answer is, Unlucky Fellow would have to take a new loan of the 5% to be able to pay the interest. And in the next year, he will have to pay interest on this interest loan he just had to take, and so on. And after some decades, he will probably again have a huge loan and be indebted with Happy Donia. He probably will not be able to pay it because he has no money. And Happy Donia will say, well, you have a garden or car. You can give me your garden or your car. And at the end, Happy Donia will end up with all the money and all the belongings, or most of the belongings of Unlucky Fellow. So there's a second group of arguments, which I would call the inverted causality argument. The key argument here is that changes in the money supply are driven by what is happening in the real economy rather than the other way around. For example, Jackson Victor write, with a suitable choice of initial values, a stationary state economy is possible. More interesting for our purposes in this paper is that this result is obtained from an economic model with interest-bearing debt. And LaRue writes, the rise in production takes shape in the mind of producers before money is created and is effectively realized when credit is granted and money is created to finance it. So the idea is, first, economy growth. If the economy grows, then more credit will be demanded, and for the more demand of credit, because of credit expansion, money supply grows. So money supply growth seeks the growth of the economy. However, this inverts causes, and this is inverted here. This argument is should be the other way around. Interest puts a pressure on banks to increase debt. Interest makes deposits grow. This means that the bank has to grant ever more loans. And interest on deposits grow independent of the real economy, even if the interest they put very low now on deposits, but still the banks have to get the money somewhere to pay the interests on deposits. So there's a strong pressure to ever increase the volume of debt. If a client amortizes the debt, what will the bank do? They will sell him or her a new debt. And if it's not to this person, then to another person. But the bank has to constantly increase the volume loaned out because the deposits also grow incessantly. So this puts a pressure on the bank to sell loans, and they do tricky marketing to get the loan under other people. In a financial crisis, then there would be said, this is a bad bank. They are so greedy, and they didn't prove or take care of their clients and granted loans to persons with subprime solvency and like that. But imagine a bank. A bank has to grow, has to increase the money loaned out because deposits also grow. They have to sell loans. So somehow they either manage to sell loans or we'll have a financial crisis. And meanwhile, we don't have the financial crisis. They are managing to sell ever greater amounts of loans. So the demand of debt does not depend on the productive output, but the other way around. Here, we are ever more indebted, and ever more debt means that at the end, we have to grow. Then there's this third line of arguments, which I would call the neglecting component interest argument. So those authors believe Yes, there is a growth imperative in the financial system, but only because of the effect of compound interest, because of the exponential growth. If you do not compound interest, then it's not growing exponentially, the money in the bank accounts and the debt. So then we would not have this growth imperative. For example, Berg and Richters and Simonet say growth imperative, the growth imperative only would result if creditors choose to keep their money in banks, since only then compound interest is paid, thus leading to exponential growth. However, even if I take out my money from the bank I receive, if I take out the interest I receive at the end of the year, I will spend it. And it will end up in some other bank accounts somewhere else in the economy and produce interest there. This is why in the whole economy, all the money supply, which is all bank accounts taken together, grows exponentially. Remember, this is real data from the US, and you could see this in any country of the world. Money supply always grows exponentially. This is obvious because even if you don't leave the money on the bank account to produce compound interest there, it will end up in some other bank account somewhere else in the economy. The fourth group of arguments against the growth imperative inherent in our monetary system is what could be called the profit maximization argument. The idea behind this is increasing profits and the pursuit of labor productivity growth is the primary cause of the growth imperative. Well, I think here the perspective conflates causes with effects. Why do we always look for increasing the labor productivity? Because we have to grow or save up costs somewhere else, as I just had explained. Increasing labor productivity is just that, replacing persons' human workforce by machines. So the human workforce that stays at the firm is lots more productive because it has to do the same amount of products and produce the same amount of products and services, but now with more help of machines. But it's nothing else than saying, so increasing labor productivity is nothing else than saying we replace humans by machines. And the fifth line of argument could be called the ambiguous role of interest arguments, which is, for example, advocated by Musu and Dietrich. They say here's a dual role of interest. One, to act as a discount rate, and one to act as price of capital. The idea of interest as a discount rate is the same as saying interest is the opportunity cost of any productive investment. If the interest rate is higher, then we have to grow. And they even use examples from the forestry industry. In times of high interest, then this puts a higher pressure on unsustainable forest management. Everything has to go fast, and this is why we even also produce or plant eucalyptus and pine trees and not native trees. But then there's the other thing. Interest is also cost. It's the price of capital. And in their opinion, yeah, this is price of capital. It means it's more expensive. And if it's more expensive, this would reduce overall production. So it's a dual role, and it's not really clear which of these two effects are stronger. However, we can see empirically powerful arguments that high interest rates in the long run lead to increased GDP growth and not to slower GDP growth. Hence, interest not only incentivizes growth, but also makes it possible. Here we see interest rate and GDP growth rate with real data from the US. And what can we see? Even though there are strong short-term fluctuations, in the long run, they develop synchronously. They are positive correlated. In the long run, high interest rates are correlated with high GDP growth and vice versa. This is actually the contrary of what we learn and what we teach in textbooks of macroeconomics. So to summarize, we have discussed and discarded 5 arguments against the existence of a growth imperative inherent in our monetary system. These arguments are rooted in a misunderstanding of the effect interest rates exert on money supply. Interest creates new money, monetary units that were not created by the central bank, which can only be repaid through the creation of new interest-bearing debt. This is practically the macroeconomic or demand side perspective. But the most important point is interest is the opportunity cost of any productive investment. This is the microeconomic or supply side perspective. We have to grow, otherwise our business does not make sense. Actually, now, this is not part of this discussion, but I just want to mention it. How could we solve this problem? How can we get rid of this growth imperative? How can we change our money in the way that interest does not exist? Or is it natural that interest exists? As Wixell said, it's a natural interest rate. In fact, interest rate is not natural. Even Aristotle already talked about the unnatural interest rate. So where did interest come from? If you remember, it was a reward for parting with liquidity, as Keynes said, right? It's a reward for not hoarding money under the mattress. So why do we like to hoard? Because it is easy to hoard. So money has this advantage against real goods that it's easy to hoard. And how can we change this? And we can learn probably a lot from Silvio Gesell, who 100 years ago wrote his masterpiece, which he called The Natural Economic Order. And in this masterpiece, Silvio Gesell tells us how can get rid of the interest rate. He immigrated from Germany to Argentina 150 years ago, and he saw two financial crises in a short period, and he said, something is wrong with the financial system. And he asked himself, how can we make money circulate without that interest rate is needed? And so he came to the conclusion, we need money that perishes as real goods do. If the money was not so easy to hoard compared to real goods, if it perished like real goods do, so interest would not exist. And this would be true neutral money, money that does not oblige to grow and actually would not produce steadily income inequality, which is the other huge side effect, which I said would be for the next talk. This would be money that people would spend, invest, or loan for free. It would circulate the economy without that a positive interest rate would be necessary. How this form of money would solve not only the unsustainable problem, but also many other problems. We do not have real solutions in economics. I wrote in this book, How to Fulfill the UN Sustainability Goals, Rethinking the Role and Concept of Money in the Light of Sustainability, published last year. I have also brought it here for someone who wants to see it. 4 years ago, we also published this book, which is more on ecological economics and the effects that has our monetary system on the natural resources, also published in Springer. Thank you very much, and I'm open for questions.